I'm not some bitter old woman who hates her family. I am a mother who gave her heart, her hands, and every ounce of her strength to raise her children. I spent decades pouring myself into them. Birthdays I planned with my own two hands. Meals I cooked late into the night after working all day. School plays where I sat in the front row, clapping the loudest. I loved them with everything I had. And yet, when I said a single word, just one word, no, my children turned on me. You see, I had become something in their eyes. Not a mother. Not a woman with feelings or needs of her own. No, I was their babysitter. Their maid, their on-call servant who was supposed to be grateful just to be included in their lives. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I told myself, they love you. Don't be dramatic. Don't overthink it. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't invited to dinners because they wanted me there. I was invited because they wanted me to keep the kids busy in the other room. I wasn't asked to come over because they missed me. I was asked to come because they needed a free nanny. And one day, after years of biting my tongue, of giving in, of telling myself that love was about sacrifice, I finally said no. That's when everything changed. Do you know what it feels like when silence replaces the voices of your children? When the phone that used to ring every other day suddenly never lights up? When your birthday passes without a call, not even a lazy text? I'll tell you, it feels like death while you're still breathing. It feels like standing in the middle of a crowded room, screaming at the top of your lungs, and nobody even turning their head to notice. It feels like you don't exist anymore. And for what? For daring to want a day to myself. For daring to remind them that I'm not just a babysitter, I am their mother. I would sit by the window sometimes, watching cars pass, and wonder if one of them was finally going to stop outside. If one of my children would get out, walk up the porch, and come in to hug me the way they used to when they were small. But the driveway stayed empty. The door stayed locked. And my house, the same one where I raised them, where laughter used to echo in every corner, became as silent as a grave. I tried to tell myself it was a phase, that they were busy, that maybe I hurt their feelings, but they'd get over it. Weeks turned into months. The silence only grew louder. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't their mother anymore. Not in the way that mattered. I was a resource, a tool, and when I stopped serving my purpose, I became disposable. Now, here's the part they never saw coming. I may be old, but I am not powerless. For all those years, I was the one who sacrificed. I was the one who held everything together. I paid the bills when they were young. I worked 2 jobs so they could have shoes for school. I skipped meals so they could eat. And now, in my old age, do you know what I had left? A choice. And that choice came in the form of a pen and a stack of legal papers. You see, my children thought I was helpless. They thought I had no power over anything. But the truth is, I held something they wanted more than my company, more than my phone calls, more than my love. I held the will, the house, the savings, the land, everything I had worked for my entire life. They assumed it would all pass to them, no matter how they treated me. They assumed they could ignore me, disrespect me, discard me, and still walk away with the reward. But they were wrong. So very, very wrong. I remember the night I made my decision. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a picture of my children when they were young. They were smiling, holding each other like the world couldn't tear them apart. My heart ached, remembering those days. But then I remembered the silence. The way they looked at me not with love, but with expectation. The way they stopped talking to me the moment I stopped giving, and suddenly, my tears dried. That was when I picked up the phone. I called my lawyer, and with every page I signed, with every line I initialed, I felt a weight lift off me. For the first time in years, I felt free. Now, let me make this clear. I didn't do it out of spite. I didn't do it because I hate my children. No, I did it because I finally realized that love is not servitude, Family is not blackmail, and respect cannot be begged for, it must be earned. So when I say I cut them out of my will, I want you to understand something. I did it with a steady hand and a clear mind. I did it because they left me no other choice. And one day, when they discover what I've done, when they realize that all the money, all the property, all the security they counted on is gone, they'll understand what it felt like to lose something they thought they could take for granted, because that's exactly what they did to me. This is not just a story about money. This is a story about power, about dignity, about finally standing up and saying, I will not be invisible in my own life. I will not be used until I have nothing left. My children thought the word no meant they could erase me, but I turned that little word into the loudest thunder they'd ever hear. And by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly how I made sure they were the ones erased from my future, not me. When I look back now, it almost feels like there were two versions of my family. There was the family I raised with love and sweat, where laughter filled the walls, and where I believed with every ounce of my being that nothing could ever come between us. And then there was the family I ended up with, entitled, distant, cold, children who only came around when they wanted something. Children who only came around when they wanted something. Children who somehow forgot that I was more than the hands that cooked their meals or the arms that rocked their babies to sleep. But let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand how it all unfolded. When my children were young, I gave them everything. And I don't say that lightly. I mean everything. There were times when my paycheck barely stretched to cover the rent and food, but I made sure they never saw the worry in my eyes. I would hide bills in drawers, shove shut-off notices under stacks of papers, and pretend everything was fine. If the fridge only had enough for them, I'd go to bed hungry and smile when they licked their plates clean. That was motherhood to me. Sacrifice. I was the mother who sat up with them all night when they were sick. Even when I had to work early the next morning, I was the one sewing costumes from old sheets for school plays, because I couldn't afford store-bought ones. I was the one who made Christmas magical even when we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. And in those moments, I truly thought that all the love I was pouring into them would come back one day, not as repayment, but as gratitude, as respect, as kindness. But somewhere along the way, the love I gave turned into expectation. It started small, almost unnoticeable. Mom, can you pick up the kids for me? I'm just so busy. Mom, could you watch them tonight? We really need a date night. Mom, do you mind staying over this weekend? It would be such a huge help. Of course, I said yes, every time, because that's what mothers do, right? They show up. They help. They make life easier for their children. And let me tell you, I loved being with my grandchildren. Their laughter reminded me of when my own kids were small, and their little arms around my neck made me feel alive in ways I can't explain. But the requests never slowed down. They multiplied. Soon, it wasn't Mom, can you help? It was Mom, you're coming, right? No longer a favor. An expectation. And the tone shifted too. If I hesitated, if I even paused, I could hear the irritation creeping into their voices. The sighs. The way they'd say, well, I guess we'll just have to find someone else. As though my entire purpose was to be at their disposal. I brushed it off for a long time. I told myself it was normal. Maybe I was just being sensitive. But little by little, I realized something chilling. I wasn't a person to them anymore. I was a function. The truth became unavoidable the day I overheard my son talking to his wife. I had spent the whole weekend at their house, cooking, cleaning, and wrangling the kids so they could catch up on work. By Sunday night, I was both. My back ached, my feet throbbed, and I just wanted to go home, take a hot bath, and sleep. But as I was putting on my coat, I heard his wife say, "Don't forget to ask your mom about next weekend. We need her again." And my son replied without hesitation, without even considering me. "Oh, she'll do it. She always does." Not "let's ask her." Not "maybe she'll be willing." Just "she do it. She always does." Like I was a machine. A guarantee. Do you know how much that stung? To realize that my love, my sacrifices, had become so automatic in their minds that they didn't even consider me a person with limits. I wish I could say it stopped there, but it only got worse. Birthdays. I was invited to cook, to clean, to make sure the kids didn't ruin the cake. Holidays. I was the one staying up late, stuffing stockings or peeling potatoes, while they lounged and laughed in the other room. Vacations. They dropped the children off at my doorstep with bags, saying, "You love spending time with them anyway," as if it was all the same to me, whether I got rest or not. The worst part. They convinced themselves it was all for me. "You love being with the kids, Mom. We're just giving you more time with them. You're happiest when you're busy. We know you'd rather be here than at home alone." No, that wasn't love. That was manipulation. But I stayed silent. Because mothers stay silent, don't they? We're taught that it's selfish to put ourselves first, that we should be grateful for scraps of attention, that our value is measured in what we give, not who we are. And for years, I played that role. Until the day I didn't. The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon. I had been asked, no, told to watch the kids again. But I had been feeling unwell all week. My knees were swollen, my chest tight, and for once, I wanted to say no. I wanted to spend the weekend resting, reading a book, maybe even gardening a little, if the weather was kind. So I said it. I said no. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Then came the coldness, the clipped words, the disbelief, as though I had committed some unthinkable crime. "You're serious? You're really going to leave us stuck like this? We can't believe you'd do this to us. Fine, don't bother coming around then." And just like that, in a single moment, my children decided I was no longer useful. They cut me off. No more phone calls. No more visits. No more invitations, not even the fake ones where they needed me to babysit. Just silence. Do you know what I did that first week of silence? I cried. I cried until my chest hurt, until my throat was raw, until I thought I'd run out of tears. I cried for the little boy and girl I once rocked to sleep. I cried for the family I thought I had. I cried because I couldn't understand how love could vanish so quickly, replaced by coldness as sharp as ice. The second week, I stopped crying. The third week, I started to see things clearly. And by the fourth week, I wasn't broken anymore. I was furious. Because the truth finally sank in. They didn't love me for me. They loved me for what I gave. And once I stopped giving, I stopped mattering. That was when I realized the power I still held. Not through my body too old, too tired for endless babysitting. Not through my voice, they had stopped listening to me years ago. But through something they had taken for granted all along, my will. The very thing they assumed would one day reward them for their treatment of me. And that's when I decided if they could erase me with silence, I could erase them with ink. When you spend your whole life giving, people assume you'll never stop. They build their worlds around the idea that you'll always be there, always available, always ready to drop everything at a moment's notice. They treat your sacrifices like air, invisible, unappreciated, but essential. And when you finally draw a line in the sand, when you finally say no, the shock on their faces isn't because they're hurt. It's because they can't believe their reliable machine has malfunctioned. That was the moment I reached. After that last phone call, the one where my own children told me not to bother coming around anymore. I sat alone in my kitchen with the receiver still warm in my hand. The words echoed in my mind, bouncing around like sharp stones. Fine. Don't bother coming around then. It was so final. So cold. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one begging to hold on. I wasn't scrambling to apologize for things I didn't do. or rushing to fix something I didn't break. I just sat there, quiet, empty. But the emptiness didn't last long. It hardened into something else. At first, it was anger. A deep, burning anger that lit me up from the inside. I thought of every birthday I made special when money was tight. Every late-night shift I worked so their shoes didn't have holes. Every time I denied myself so they could have more. I thought of how I raised them with values, respect, kindness, empathy, only to be treated like a disposable nanny once they had families of their own. I thought of how easily they cut me off the moment I stopped serving them. And then I thought of the one thing, the one card I still held close to my chest. My will. You see, like many parents, I had always assumed my children would inherit what little I had. My house, my savings, a few treasured heirlooms. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And I wanted it to mean something to them after I was gone. For years, I kept that will tucked away, thinking it was a symbol of love, a safety net, proof that no matter what, I was still giving to them, even in death. But that night, as I sat in my quiet kitchen staring at the blank wall, I realized something that nearly made me laugh out loud. Why on earth should I leave anything to people who had already shown me I was worthless to them? Why should I reward cruelty with comfort? Why should my legacy go to children who only saw me as a babysitter, not a mother? That's when the anger turned into clarity. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just an old woman discarded by her own family. I was still in control. I could still choose. And my choice was simple. I would cut them out. The very next morning, I called my lawyer. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, his voice cautious, as though he thought I might regret it. "More sure than I've been about anything in years," I told him. And I meant it. We scheduled an appointment for that very afternoon. I didn't wait, didn't hesitate. Because if I gave myself time to think, to second guess, the mother in me might start whispering again, the one who always made excuses for her children's behavior, who always found a way to forgive. But that mother was gone. This was the woman they created. Sitting in that lawyer's office, I felt a strange mix of grief and power. Grief, because part of me still ached for the family I once believed I had. Power, because for the first time in decades, I was doing something for myself. I told him everything. How my children had slowly turned me into their servant. How they cut me off the moment I set a boundary. How they hadn't even called to check if I was okay since that fight. He listened carefully, his pen scratching across the paper. And when he asked me who I wanted to leave my estate to instead, I didn't hesitate. I named charities that actually helped people. Friends who had stood by me when my own children didn't. And, most importantly, my grandchildren. Not through their parents, no, I didn't trust that anymore. But directly, through a trust that would ensure the money went to their education, their future, their chance at a better life. Because they were innocent in all this. They were still just children. And though their parents had turned cold, I wouldn't let that bitterness rob the next generation. When I signed the papers, I felt something lift from me. It was like setting down a heavy bag I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. For so long, I had let guilt and obligation chain me to people who didn't value me. Now, with one signature, I had broken those chains. Walking out of that office, I didn't feel old. I didn't feel weak. I felt alive. I went home, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window as the sun dipped low. And for the first time in years, I smiled a real smile. Not the forced ones I wore at family gatherings. Because I knew something my children didn't. They thought they had erased me. But I had just erased them. And let me tell you something, the peace that decision brought me was worth more than any inheritance they could have ever received. It was the peace of knowing that I was finally standing up for myself. The peace of knowing that my love could no longer be exploited. The peace of knowing that my final act in this world would not be to reward the very people who broke me, but to honor those who truly mattered. For the first time in a long, long time, I was free. You know, people always say you never really know someone until money is involved. And I used to laugh at that. I thought my family was different. That love would always matter more than bank accounts or property deeds. But I learned the truth the hard way. It didn't happen right away. For a while, my life was quiet, peaceful, even. I went about my days tending to my little garden, knitting by the fire, enjoying the company of neighbors who actually asked how I was doing. I thought maybe, just maybe, my children would come around. But weeks turned into months, and the silence remained. No calls, no visits. No, I love you at the end of the day. And that told me everything I needed to know. Still, I didn't say a word about the will. I kept that little secret locked tight in my chest, like a weapon, waiting for its moment. The first crack came when my oldest daughter, Emily, called out of the blue. Her voice was sugary sweet, like honey poured over something rotten. "Hi, Mom," she said, as though nothing had happened. "I was just thinking, we should come visit you soon. Maybe bring the kids. They miss you." But I could hear it. That nervous edge in her tone, the way she was circling around what she really wanted to say. So I let her ramble for a few minutes, before I finally asked, "Emily, why are you really calling me?" There was a pause. Then a sigh. "Well, it's just that Mark and I have been talking. We know you've got your will set up, and I guess we were wondering if everything's still, arranged the way it used to be." There it was. Not "How are you, Mom?" Not "We're sorry for what we said." Just "Are we still getting your money when you die?" I didn't answer her right away. I let the silence stretch until she grew uncomfortable. Finally, I said, "Emily, you don't need to worry about my will. It's taken care of." I could practically hear her shoulders drop with relief through the phone. She thought I meant everything was still the same. And that's when I realized just how blind they all were. They thought I'd never change, that I'd always keep giving, even when they gave nothing in return. Little did they know, their names had already been erased. The real fireworks came months later, after I ended up in the hospital for a short stay. Nothing too serious, just a scare with my blood pressure. But hospitals are funny places, news travels fast. Somehow, word got around to my children. And suddenly, like vultures circling over a wounded animal, they appeared. All three of them showed up at my bedside, faces plastered with concern. Emily brought flowers. My son, David, put on that fake smile he always used when he wanted something. And my youngest, Sarah, even held my hand like she cared. But I saw through it. Oh, I saw through every single one of them. They weren't there for me. They were there for what I might leave behind. When I was discharged, I went back home, and for a short while, they kept up the act. Dropping by more often. Calling me to check in. Acting like the loving children they should have been all along. But I knew better. And soon enough, they showed their true faces again. Because one day, David cornered me in the kitchen. "Mom," he started, his voice low and serious. "I think it's time we reviewed your will. Just in case. I'd hate for there to be any confusion later." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "There won't be any confusion, David. Everything is perfectly clear." The way his brow furrowed told me he didn't like that answer. But I didn't care. The bomb finally dropped 6 months later. After my lawyer, following my instructions, mailed sealed letters to each of my children, informing them of the new arrangements. I wish you could have seen their faces. Emily stormed into my house first, the letter crumpled in her fist. "How could you do this to us?" she screamed. "We're your children. We've always been there for you." I laughed, actually laughed. "Always been there for me? Emily, you dropped me the second I stopped babysitting your kids. You haven't even said I love you in years." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. David showed up next, red-faced and shaking. "This is a betrayal, Mom. We're family. Family doesn't abandon each other when they stop being useful, I told him. Family doesn't treat their mother like a burden. If you wanted my love to translate into money, you should have shown me love when I was alive to feel it. And Sarah? She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She just stood there, her eyes cold, and said, "You'll regret this." But she was wrong. I didn't regret it for a second. Word spread fast through the family. Cousins, uncles, distant relatives, they all whispered about it. Some called me cruel. Some called me brave. But here's the thing. I didn't do it out of cruelty. I did it out of clarity. My children made their choice when they decided I wasn't worth their time unless I was useful to them. And I made mine when I decided my legacy would not be wasted on people who only knew how to take. The fallout was messy. My children stopped speaking to me altogether. They told anyone who would listen that I was spiteful, selfish, vindictive. But do you know what? I finally slept at night. For the first time in decades, I felt no weight on my chest, no guilt, no shame, because I had taken back my power. And in the end, that mattered more than their approval ever could. You know, when people talk about betrayal, they often imagine grand acts. A knife in the back. A lie so big it shatters your world in an instant. But betrayal doesn't always come in dramatic flashes. Sometimes, it's quiet, subtle. It's the phone that doesn't ring. The visit that never comes. The hug that feels stiff, like a duty instead of love. And for me, that slow, quiet betrayal hurts far worse than anything sudden ever could. For years, I told myself excuses. They're just busy with their own lives. They'll come around when things settle down. They don't mean to hurt me, they just forget sometimes. But deep down, I knew. I knew the truth I didn't want to face. My children loved the idea of me, not the reality of me. They loved the mother who babysat, the mother who wrote checks, the mother who bent over backward to make their lives easier. But once I stopped being useful, they loved me no more than they loved an empty chair. That realization nearly broke me. I can't lie, there were nights I cried myself to sleep, clutching the quilt I had sewn when they were babies. There were mornings when I couldn't bear to look at the family photos on my wall, because all I saw was pretense. But life has a funny way of forcing strength into you when you least expect it. And one morning, as I sat in my kitchen sipping coffee, staring out at the sun rising over the garden, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done waiting for their love. I was done begging for crumbs of affection that should have been freely given. If they couldn't see my worth while I was alive, then they wouldn't get the benefit of it when I was gone. Changing my will wasn't about revenge. No, it was about justice. About teaching them that actions have consequences. About reminding myself that I still had control over my life, even if they thought I was weak, old, and easy to manipulate. Do you know how liberating that was? To sit across from my lawyer, pen in hand, and draw a line through their names. Each stroke felt like shedding a chain that had bound me for years. Line by line, I took my life back. And the funniest part, the world didn't end. I didn't collapse under guilt. I didn't crumble with regret. Instead, I felt lighter, stronger, like a storm had passed. And for the first time in decades, the sky was clear. Now, don't mistake me. I'm not saying it was easy. There were lonely days. There were holidays when I sat at a quiet table. No children, no grandchildren. Just me and my memories. And in those moments, the temptation to reach out, to apologize just to mend the rift, was strong. But then I'd remember, I didn't cause the rift. They did. They turned their backs when I needed them most. They treated me like a burden instead of a blessing. They gambled with my heart, and they lost. So I held my ground. Over time, something remarkable happened. I started to rediscover myself. I joined a local book club and found women my age who understood the sting of being overlooked by family. I volunteered at the church kitchen, where strangers smiled at me with more warmth than my children ever had. I even planted a new row of roses in the garden, something I'd put off for years because I was always too busy helping everyone else. And as the roses bloomed, so did I. I realized something powerful. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, family is the neighbor who shovels your driveway without being asked. The friend who calls every week just to make sure you're okay. The stranger who holds your hand in the doctor's office when you're scared. Those small acts of kindness, they meant more to me than any half-hearted "I love you" my children could muster. Looking back now, I see it all so clearly. My children thought they were clever. They thought they could manipulate me, guilt me, and corner me into giving them everything I had. But what they never understood was this: I had lived too long, endured too much, to be fooled by shallow love. I was stronger than they realized. And when the time came, I showed them exactly how strong I could be. I don't know what they'll tell people after I'm gone. Maybe they'll paint me as bitter, vindictive, heartless. Maybe they'll cry crocodile tears at my funeral and pretend they loved me all along. But the truth will live on in my choice. The house they coveted, the money they expected, the inheritance they thought was guaranteed, it will go to those who earned it. Maybe to charity. Maybe to the neighbor who shoveled my snow. Maybe to a scholarship fund for kids who actually understand gratitude. Anywhere but them. And that, my dear, is the legacy I want to leave behind. Not one of bitterness. Not one of anger. But one of strength. Of self-respect. Of reminding others and myself that love without action is meaningless. So when people ask me if I regret it, I smile. Because no, I don't regret a thing. If anything, I regret not doing it sooner. I spent too many years chained by guilt. Too many years giving to those who never gave back. But in the end, I found freedom. And freedom, my dear, is worth more than any fortune. I may have lost my children's affection, but I gained something far greater: peace. And if I had to choose again, I'd choose peace every time.